We take a single episode of a science fiction TV series and overanalyze it to within an inch of its life. This is the Fusion Patrol Podcast. Welcome to the discussion. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Ben.
And tonight it's The Invaders, a Quinn Martin production. Tonight's episode, The Fantastic Journey. All right, well, I'll just say that there's a reason that I used that. No, tonight you know what it is.
I know exactly why you said that. You know, I saw that scene and I went, holy, that's from The Invaders.
So we are actually talking about The Fantastic Journey and Innocent Prey. And you will all be pleased to know, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wow, 2 weeks in a row? But
for a reason.
This is a mercy killing. This is it. This is the last episode. This is the episode where they get to Evoland and they find out all the answers and they figure out what's going on here and they get back to their homes and
it's happily ever after.
But for now, our summary goes as follows. An Earth space shuttle crashes near our intrepid travelers. Before they can get there, the pilot of the shuttle is killed by one of his prisoners. The prisoners then take the identity of the crew and escape the wreckage with Varian and the boys. Soon, they come across really pretty people from another world that have no concept of lying, theft, deceit, or violence. They also have a really awesome ball. The main baddie sets his eye on the ball, while the secondary baddie, who really isn't that bad, sets his eye on an angel. The baddie murders the leader's son, but then he denies it, which is all good, because that's plenty for the pretty people. Fred goes ballistic because bad guys are bad and stuff, and his mom and some stuff, and it just makes him so angry. Well, the baddie knows Varian and the boys are on to him, so he kidnaps Scott, who is one of the boys, who probably wasn't on to him. So Varian and most of the boys, minus Scott, who gets kidnapped, and threatens to kill him. Scott, that is, not the baddie or Varian. So the pretty people give him the ball, and it turns him into a baby. Story over, series over. They will never find Evoland, at least not until the J.J. Abrams reboot movie.
There's something that you missed in your synopsis, in this wrap-up that you gave.
I did.
And that is the not-so-bad guy, Ty. Well, we've heard about child actors, you know, when they grow up, they kind of fall into a bad way. I mean, he was this cute little Von Trapp.
That's
Ty
true.
Von Trapp. Actually, Ty's his middle name. He was Friedrich Ty Von Trapp. In The Sound of Music, then he kind of grows up, falls into a bad way, kind of becomes a petty thief in whatever century that he's from. But, you know, he gets his redemption because when he goes through Evoland, he sees the error of his ways and becomes Spider-Man.
Indeed. That is the singing Von Trapp Spider-Man guy.
Yeah. Friedrich Ty Von Trapp.
Parker.
Friedrich Ty Peter Parker Von Trapp. He had to drop the Von Trapp, otherwise no one would take him seriously as Peter Parker. Then he'd be a singing reporter. I don't think anybody
would take him as seriously as Peter Parker.
Well, then he'd be the singing reporter.
I wonder if he could still sing. You know, it's like the kids. Could he sing when he was a kid? I mean, you just
actually he did. Yeah, that really was him singing.
Oh no, I know it was him singing, but you know, you when before your voice changes and stuff, some people can sing, and then afterwards, all gone.
Well, he certainly gave it up. I mean, I looked at his IMDb. He didn't really do much music after that.
Straight to Spider-Man, and then nothing.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
That one was a show killer. You never saw. I can't think of the name, David White again after that either.
No, not really.
Yeah. Although the other one. So there was like two J. Jonah Jamesons in that. There was David White, who was Larry Tate from Bewitched, and then there was J.J. Simon. Is that the other guy?
J.J. Simmons.
J.J. Simmons, that's it. Who I think we have.
J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons, yeah.
J.K. Simmons?
It's something like that, yeah.
His last name is Simmons.
Simmons. That Simmons guy who was, all that. And then he probably did other stuff, so my theory is blown all to all to heck anyway.
Well.
So, as we alluded to at the beginning of this episode, that is a shot straight out of the Quinn Martin series, The Invaders, with the Earth shuttle coming back to the planet. Did we not just have a conversation, I don't know, last week or the week before, about how we never see anybody from post-Willoway or post-Fred, but pre-Varian?
Pre-Varian.
And then here you go.
There it is.
Yeah, I'm just a musician. I don't know much about that stuff, but...
No, it was a somewhat amusing line. Yeah, Varian's... yeah, I think Willoway pretty much called Varian on the carpet, or at least exposed him for what he is. He says, hey, he's just a musician. He doesn't know anything.
Musicians are healers because that's...
Because that's what music does.
Yes. So, this episode... I'm really pleased that the show went on a bang because I think this has got to be the best of the bunch. Would you agree? Okay. Right. But it doesn't rise to the level of being the worst either.
No, it doesn't. Or drop to the level.
It is about nothing.
It is as mediocre as it could get.
I watched this episode, and you know, typically I watch these maybe a day or two before we do the podcast, but I watched this one about 5 days before the podcast.
I watched it last night.
And two days after I watched it, I could not remember its name, who was in it, what it was about, any set pieces,
because
nothing.
It is utterly insubstantial.
It was gone. When I had to look in my notes, and when I looked in my notes, I go, oh yeah, Cheryl Ladd. So, here's a question for you. We have these people, the pretty people, and they're apparently from another planet, where they're all pretty, and they have no concepts of lying, privacy,
murder,
ownership, violence, murder. They are
so innocent.
They don't even understand the concept of a door, because what? What?
Why would I stop someone from coming in?
So let me ask you this question, and I mean this question in absolute seriousness. Why was I not able to look at Cheryl Ladd naked in this episode then? Because no sense of privacy.
They had clothing on.
I know. Why?
That is a really good question, because here they are trying to present us with this Garden of Eden, essentially. And, I mean, that's what I was kind of getting out of this initially, that... You've got this Garden of Eden, and our travelers bringing York and Ty along with them symbolize the serpent, bringing the knowledge of good and evil into this Garden of Eden. That's what I was getting. But then the two things, they're not completely naked. I can tell you why. It's primetime NBC. That's the only reason.
That seems like a very... very poor reason to deny me this. But anyway, Cheryl Ladd's very pretty.
It's 1977, primetime NBC. I mean, now if this show were on Netflix, it'd be a different story.
That's right, or HBO, perhaps.
Yeah, something that's not quite so networky. You get your shot at seeing her naked. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it now. But this was
grumble. Yeah.
A very poor representation. I mean, if this was supposed to be a parable of the Garden of Eden, I kind of think that they sort of led us the wrong way with how the story resolves itself.
Did you hear me slap my head, by the way, when you said that? I did. Because I honestly didn't get that. I did not get the Garden of Eden parable. I mean, that's what I thought it was
supposed to be.
As soon as you said it, it was like, of course.
Well, here's the thing, and I wouldn't hit yourself in the head too many times.
Murder too.
Well, no, I was going to say this. I wouldn't hit yourself in the head too many times, because if it was supposed to be Garden of Eden, if there was supposed to be some kind of a parable, they completely went in the opposite direction, and presented this really flower power. Oh, how trippy, how wonderful! Innocence wins the day. And then I come back with, well, what was the whole point of this? There's no parable at all then. There's no moral to this story. I mean, I can't say that innocence wins it. I mean, that's not a moral. Because innocence lost is innocence lost. You don't get it back. Yeah. And yet they've come up with this wonderful MacGuffin that allows you to, retain your innocence, regain your innocence. Like, Wow. What is this episode trying to prove?
I think in Arabic countries, they actually have surgery to regain your innocence. But I'll just leave that out there. We'll move on. Let's just move on. But, yeah.
And in typical Fantastic Journey
fashion,
we completely forgot all about the 12 keys.
Yeah, we did. In fact, now that you mention it, the 12 keys. It's like,
I would have loved it if the orb had been one of those keys.
In this episode, we've also completely forgotten about Liana.
Liana and Salel, or Mr. Whiskers, as you like to say.
He's gone. I am so... Now, I mean,
Not even a mention.
Not even a mention. I mean, they're completely gone. That's why I called it Varian and the Boys, because it's like we've just lost all the... Well, the story is... I don't know if we mentioned this last time or not, because I can't remember, but I kind of vaguely might think that we didn't mention it because we didn't want people to know that Liana would not be in the last 2 episodes because she was sick. And maybe, I don't know whether you and I talked about this or we talked it in the podcast. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that she got sick, and so they hastily wrote her out of the last episode, which I've completely forgotten. And then this episode, they didn't even bother to write her out of it. Now, I'm wondering if, she either did or did not legitimately get sick, or she got the blue flu or whatever it is, and they just, show's over, don't worry, don't even bother to show up. We don't care. It's all over.
Well, her final episode in Turnabout was horrible.
Yes, I mean,
especially given that here's this episode, it's all about the genders and power and control and all that sort of thing. And her role in that, I mean, if anything, there was enormous potential for her to have a significant part in that, especially in the setup earlier on when she and Varian kind of engage in this ridiculous little charade. A charade. But nothing, absolutely nothing comes from it. I mean, she was completely dismissed in that story. So if she did have a case of blue flu, I would certainly not blame her.
I feel like this is the Belinda J. Montgomery blue flu.
It sort of feels like that, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. So, no Liana. So there's not a whole heck of a lot to be watching here on the show at that point. No Mr. Whiskers.
No.
So that's even worse. And, yeah. I mean, it really was a kind of nothing episode. Now, I think it was meant to be a Fred episode.
That's kind of my thought, too. It's supposed to be more about him and a little bit on his background.
I'm really upset about these bad people. Bad people are bad. And he says the line, and I wanted to go kick his teeth from the TV screen. He says the line, "Nobody never does nothing."
Oh, that annoyed me. I'm sorry. Now, if that is a writer's attempt to try and have
ethnicize him?
Yeah, if they're trying to make some sort of sympathetic character to... Oh, God. I mean, there's really no good way to say that, but it was an insulting thing to have him say because of who he is.
Yeah, if Willoway had said it, it'd been okay, but it wouldn't have.
To be honest, it's not okay for anybody to say it.
No. Well,
but to have...
Yes, sure. Sanford and Son, if you're trying to portray...
Well,
if you're trying to portray an uneducated person, but for crying out loud, he's a doctor.
He's a doctor. And this is the first time... I mean, okay, we've heard him kind of use little...
Yo, baby, and stuff like that. But
yo, mama,
okay.
Things like that. Okay, that's sort of cultural thing. But to actually lapse into really bad grammar, I think is a huge insult. And it's...
Let's call it condescending.
It's very condescending to where he comes from. And at the same time, it's almost like you're trying to create a very negative stereotype. It doesn't bode well, it left a bad taste in my mouth.
Is it because he's back on the streets as a little boy, remembering the time when his mom got beat up by some thugs?
If that, I wouldn't be surprised if that was their excuse, but that does not excuse it.
But that's why he was really upset about.
Well, because he's being reminded about who he is?
About crime. He's really upset about crime. He couldn't be upset about it because it's wrong, or I don't know. It just, the whole thing that he was just had his shorts in a bunch about this.
Well, I mean, obviously they were supposed to write it in such a way that it was supposed to push his buttons, but it was not executed well. And I want to, we've seen a lot of instances in this series where any kind of character development was badly executed. And we can talk about that a little bit later when we do a complete series wrap-up. But this is just one more example on how they badly handled him. And it could have been a good moment for him.
So, okay. There's just so little about this episode to go. But I want to bring up Richard Jekyll, who played the baddie.
York?
And, yeah. He played a baddie in all sorts of shows. But one show he did not play the bad guy in. He played a sort of sympathetic FBI agent that is on the potential list for shows that Fusion Patrol could watch. That is everybody's favorite, Salvage 1.
Oh, no.
Yeah. He was one of the co-stars with Andy Griffith and Joel Higginbotham, or whatever his name was.
Oh, dear.
I've been trying to come up with the follow-on series for A Fantastic Journey, and that is Salvage 1. I mean, come on. It's almost like they're telling us we should do Salvage 1. Anyway. All right, fine. We'll just go. So here's my question. These people have no concept of, well, even white lies. Nothing, right? Now, this seems to me like, I guess if no one has that, then I suppose you can get by. But as soon as the first person comes in that isn't like you are at a distinct evolutionary disadvantage.
Yeah?
I mean, Willoway should have been running this place by the end of this episode. I mean, he would have done that if they were green and wore little alien sombreros.
If he had been left to his own devices like we saw in Beyond the Mountain, then yeah, he would have been.
So, I mean, it would have been hard. It would be hard for any person not to, at the least, white lies. You know, we do that naturally to protect people's feelings, but so I mean, they are so ill-suited to interacting with us that it seems. So my question is this: when Spider-Man stays behind with Kelly Garrett or whichever Charlie's Angel that was, I can't remember now. Oh, it's so terrible. No, Kelly Garrett surely must have been Jacqueline Smith. Yeah, that was, I don't know which one Cheryl Ladd was, but she was the blonde.
Yes.
Do you feel that he could function there? Do you think one of us could actually live in that environment and not destroy the place? It seems, I mean, how can he not have fits of jealousy or even little bits of jealousy and everyone there is completely oblivious to it. So you could just, it would be like a case of absolute power corrupting absolutely.
Well,
it would be really hard not to manipulate those people to get what you want.
It would be.
Oh.
It would be, and in the case of York, that was something that he wanted to do. Now, obviously, what was his name? Ty, I think his name was. Yeah, of course, he has a completely different agenda. You know, his was,
and his crime's not as bad. Yeah.
No, I mean, he's not a psychopath like York is. Mm-hmm. So obviously, he's going to try to manipulate York into getting him out of there and back home.
But he is a person who could do something dishonest. He was a forger, wasn't he?
He was. All we know is that he stole.
Oh, okay. So
he was a thief.
But he's a person who could break the law when it's to his advantage or to his need. So, I mean, right off the bat. Now
we don't know why he stole. It's never really gone into great detail as to why he did. I mean, he may actually. It strikes me that he does have a very good soul.
Why is there no food on the table? The dog ate it. Oh, okay. She's like, it's like, uh-oh. Wow, you mean that worked? Huh. Okay. Yeah, I
well, I mean, it could happen. I mean, it really could happen, but I'm going to actually give this one a pass, oddly enough.
You think they've redeemed him enough to the point where he'll never have to...
I think I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he subjected himself to the MacGuffin.
Well,
I mean, not to the degree that York was.
I was going to say, he gets reverted to a baby. He's not going to have much fun with Cheryl Ladd.
Not to that degree. But the orb as Rayat, played by the respectable Lou Ayres.
Mm-hmm. President
as
of the
Rayat
Council
says,
on the Battlestar Galactica.
He was president of the Council of 12. As he states, everything in that community is about balance. And I suppose that had Ty been willing, and I could see that he would be, that the orb might help restore the balance within him. Now, in the case of York, it had to take a much greater move. It had to take a more drastic action in order to restore balance there, largely by turning him back into a baby and raising him all over again as a son. In the case of Ty, I would say that the restoration of balance would be less drastic.
Would you undergo such a drastic personality change for a person that you fancied that you just met like yesterday?
If it were to achieve a sense of innocence, I might. I might actually do it.
I don't know. I kind of I'm having a Captain Kirk moment here. I need my pain. I would not be me. I mean, I kind of like me.
I know.
I know.
In a really weird way, it does kind of hearken to like Paradise Syndrome or This Side of Paradise. I mean, it does kind of have that vibe to it, and I'm of the same mindset as you, in that I don't believe that. What's the word I'm looking? It's not paradise, but that kind of idyllic community or way of being.
Shangri-La.
Yeah, Shangri-La. I mean, that's not something which can be bestowed. It's something which I think, for the case of humanity, must be earned.
We must fight our way tooth and claw up.
But in a way, yeah. Now, in the case of the pretty people, well, they're alien.
That's right.
So they have a completely different cultural background. So for them to come into this way of existence,
they aren't even wearing clothes. That's what they look like.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's in for a big, unfortunate
huge
surprise.
shock. Yeah. And we got to be careful, otherwise we're going to have to slap an explicit tag on this one. In the case of them, I could definitely give it a pass. Now, as far as Ty goes, that's a really good question. It is possible, but as I said earlier, I mean, Paradise. As I said, it has to be something that is earned, not bestowed. It is very possible that maybe he sees something worthwhile in there.
Well, he is a convict who's escaped from a prison sentence, so he is being offered a form of redemption here. This is a chance for another life. So I mean, I can understand why he'd take it. I just didn't get the impression that they were going to go off and go, by the way, we need to alter your mind or anything. I just have this feeling that this nice guy, who perhaps
he could take advantage of it,
is going to be put in this position, and he's not going to realize just how. I mean, come on. Have you never snuck up behind somebody and tapped them on the shoulder on the opposite side and pretended like it wasn't you?
Yeah,
right?
Practical jokes.
Can you imagine a whole colony of people that would fall for that every time you did it? Tap, tap, tap. Who was that? There was somebody over there. Oh, I wonder who it was. It's like living with goldfish.
I know, but at the same time, though, that joke is only funny when they understand the joke. And if you're playing that kind of thing on people that just have no concept of it, it ceases to be funny.
I don't know. I could try it a few hundred times and find out.
Oh, you would be bored out of your mind in no time flat. Now, in the case, a thought had occurred to me. There's a lot of societal or social evidence that shows, if you drop a person in a really bad environment over a period of time, if that's all they know, if that's all they're surrounded with, then they're going to acclimate to it. And it's possible that by placing Ty, who is not inherently that bad a person, it's very possible that by putting him in an environment that is rather paradisical, a really beautiful Shangri-La, idyllic kind of place, maybe he actually does kind of go through a personal evolution. As I said, that kind of environment, that kind of life must be earned. Maybe this is how he earns it.
Maybe he'll adapt to them, or they will adapt to him. One or the other. But I'll tell you something. This is possibly, I mean, with the exception of Willoway's sex slave episode, this has got to be the deepest philosophical discussion we've ever had on an episode of Fantastic Journey.
I certainly wasn't expecting
it.
That's before an episode that's kind of
vapid,
totally vapid, and it has really nothing going for it.
I mean, apart from Cheryl Ladd.
Excuse me?
Apart from Cheryl Ladd, it has Cheryl Ladd going for it. Yeah, well, it does.
Yeah, don't care.
Yeah, well, it's like...
I noticed Nicholas Hammond. What can I say?
He didn't have his funny haircut that he had. And did you ever notice he had a really funny haircut as Spider-Man?
Yeah, it's called the 70s. I know, not so much here. Not so much here, yeah.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, I don't... The only other thing I have to even mention is the fact that I thought it was nice that Willoway was actually... I mean, he was stupid about some stuff here in this episode, as were they all, but that he was interested in the technology of the spaceship.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it adds a little...
It seemed to be his driving force. It's like, I want to talk to the pilot about the ship. I mean, it's a spaceship. I was at NASA and Caltech and Berkeley, and I want to know about the ship. I mean, actually, for the first time, we really see Willoway's real vocation.
Yeah. I mean, it fleshes out his character. And, yeah, I like that. I mean, I think we got a little bit of that with Fred, too, although in a rather kind of dark and rather borderline ridiculous sort of way, but we did get that. So, but yes, with Willoway, it was rather nice. I enjoyed it enormously. Pity we won't get to see much of that anymore.
Yeah,
The one thing that caught me totally by surprise on this is, well, no, there are two things, and that is, in both cases, this episode so went off formula. And the obvious one is one that I already brought up, and that is this whole Garden of Eden parallel. How I really thought that they would have to adapt to having the knowledge of good and evil introduced into their society. I mean, we've seen other science fiction shows that have introduced that kind of concept. I mean, even Space 1999 in their second year, I mean, they kind of deal with that with this very innocent type people, and then they want to understand violence, for example. And when Koenig chops one of them, knocks one of them in the chin, it's like, oh, now we understand violence and murder and killing. It's like, okay. But so it's not a new idea, but the way they did it here was so unexpected.
I kind of feel like we might be looking at DC Fontana here. I mean, I shouldn't write it, but you mentioned the Bible, the Garden of Eden parallel. So here we have innocence and then the knowledge of evil, or just knowledge, as some people interpret it to be.
The apple
provides understanding and non-innocence, if you will, and that leads to the downfall of mankind. And you could take that very pessimistic, dark view of humanity, starting in chapter 1 there, and you could project it forward to the discussion we've had in the past about some people see the future as we're just as crummy as we were now. We just, instead of having lousy builders building buildings that fall apart, we have lousy builders building spatial stations that fall apart, and we still cheat on each other, and
we bring all our darkness out into the stars.
To the stars with us, and then you have the Star Trek approach that says, yes, we have the darkness, but we continue to strive to get away from the darkness. This is the opportunity to take the Garden Eden story and turn it in the quote-unquote Star Trek direction. Maybe you can better yourself and go. So maybe that's what Spider-Man's off to doing. So I mean, we could take it that way and say, why not give it a different message at the end?
Well, that's kind of what I was expecting, and we didn't get that. Instead, we get this whole innocence still wins at the end of the day, and I thought, well, what was the whole point of everything that we just went through? And the other thing was Ty himself. I mean, boy, was I expecting him to die in sacrifice. And that would have
true. I did expect that.
That would have played along with the whole fall from innocence, but picking yourself back up and now charting, you're now in control of your own destiny. you have the understanding, and now you have the power to choose good or evil kind of thing. And they could look to what Ty did and his sacrifice to save, Scott, save Nautica, save Rayet, and show that, you can be noble in your actions. Instead of living in this innocent bubble where the ore provides balance for everything. I mean, there were two opportunities that would have worked so well together to tell a good story, albeit possibly predictable, but it still could have been more effective than what we got here.
Well, lots of things could have been more effective than what we got here. So, I mean, that wouldn't be hard. I just, this story falls apart for me, and I don't want to harp on it over and over again, but in a way it harps on it's the close. I know that's television, but trying to wrap your head around not understanding lying, not understanding violence, not understanding these negative things. What is it that they can't understand exactly? Do they not understand want? Because I think they do understand want, because he said if you want something, you take it. You can have it. That's fine. So they understand that they must understand scarcity. They must understand they have negative emotions because they understand grief. I can't quite wrap my head around the pattern that's supposed to be here.
That one threw me. Want, not so much, because I think want comes in various
I'm hungry
grades. Okay, I'm hungry. Yeah, sure. But there's I desire to eat, and then there's want, which borders on lust.
What would they do if there was no food? I mean, would they, if they all got hungry, would they never turn to cannibalism?
As long as the orb is in existence, that's never going to be a problem. I mean, that's the kind of MacGuffin that thing is. It is the thing that takes care of all of that negative, or the negative aspects to many of the emotions that we're attributing them to. Now, as far as
create the gems, I want to please you. So there's a. I mean, it's.
Yeah, but they also have no sense of monetary value either. It's like gems here, have them. We don't care. I mean, they mean nothing to us.
But it's still. I mean, it's still. There's love, and obviously. She falls in love with him. He falls in love with her. There is, I mean, those are conflictingly needy and giving things. And again, it just feels like that. I've used this phrase before with Fantastic Journey, that it was not a very well thought out culture by the writers.
It wasn't. And I mean, I can kind of move past the love thing. The one that really stuck in my craw was the grief.
It's a raw emotion.
It's a very raw.
I mean, someone you love gets old and they die. Someone, rock falls on them, they die. You're sad. I kind of get it. I mean,
but what Nautica was experiencing, I mean, that was, as you pointed out, that was very raw, screaming grief. That's a dark emotion. And if you've got this innocence that just permeates your entire culture and all its people and your very way of being, then on that scale, it should be as equally foreign as lying.
Yeah. I mean, you again, we come back to the Garden of Eden parallel. The apple is a form of knowledge. It's an understanding that you're naked. It's an understanding of I don't exactly say right and wrong, but I mean it is knowledge screws up innocence, and I think that's a true statement.
It does, yes.
Knowledge screws up. These aren't stupid people. They have lots of knowledge. They know what crimes are. They just don't understand. It's like, well. So are you just stupid? And
well, here and again, as you said, there's something of a contradiction that goes on here. I mean, we're led to believe that this is the kind of community that these people have, and yet there are aspects to it which kind of speak to the contrary. So again, we come back, and then to have the orb save the day by restoring this balance. And that's really what we should be talking about. We shouldn't be saying so much innocence. We should be using the word harmony, because that's the word they kept throwing out. Harmony.
Then this episode should have been called Harmonious Prey. No? That's not as good.
Actually, no, it's not as good. Innocent Prey makes for a better title, but Harmonious Prey would have... Harmonious Prey? Discordant...
That actually sounds like a character from a book.
Yeah.
My name is Harmonious Prey.
No, actually, no, the more that I think about it, Harmonious Prey would be right, because they are the ones who are living in harmony, and they were the prey to York, who was the discordant character in the bunch. So, yeah, Harmonious Prey actually would have been a more accurate title.
I miss Liana. I miss Mr. Whiskers. I miss Mr. Whiskers more than my Liana. That's pretty sad. It's like, he always had that sort of, look on his face like, I'm bored, feed me.
I'm a cat.
I got nothing in this episode other than that. I mean,
that's pretty much all that I've got. I mean, I don't know what this was supposed to be about. I have no idea. I mean, we got a story here. Instead of having
filler between the commercials.
It was. I mean, with the travelers being, the ones who supposedly bring the knowledge of good and evil. I mean, that's what we thought we were getting. Instead, we get a story about how innocence wins out, which to me seems really ridiculous, and how harmony and balance always find a way. I mean, it's like a blend between New Age and flower power.
So we don't have to destroy innocence. We can embrace innocence instead of destroying it. It's not so much that innocence wins out. It's that innocence is to be aspired to. I think that's what they're going for, as opposed to...
That's a bad message.
Well, I agree, and there's a reason you don't want to be innocent, but because innocent people get taken all their money.
Well, because in this particular case, innocence is almost synonymous with ignorant. And as you pointed out, once you have knowledge, you're no longer ignorant. Therefore, your innocence is gone. So to aspire to innocence, that means give me a frontal lobotomy.
Well, yes, that's exactly what you need to be a writer on this show, apparently. This was actually the first episode written by this writer after their frontal lobotomy, and
Robert Hamilton. But he was just your basic TV jobber, writing for practically anything that he could get hired for.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I mean, he was a working writer.
So he knew how to put together a 3-act story, 4-act play. He should have been able to. But anyway, it was. I can write fantastical stuff now because it's this crazy, fantastic journey show. Anyway, okay, so we've come to the end of the show with a whimper. And
boy, did we ever! And here's something that just really kind of it was just nagging at me as I got to the end of this episode. Was this the designed final episode for the season? Because at the time, I don't think they knew the series was being canceled yet.
I'm sure this was not meant to be the last episode.
For the season?
Yeah. I'm sure that it wasn't meant to be. I think they were trying to go for the full... Well, I mean, they just didn't make shows that had season cliffhangers and
No, but there's absolutely no kind of resolution of any sort either. Did nothing to even suggest a furthering of the story. I found this great website.
I think it just ran out. I think they just ran out. I think
well, maybe they did. Now, I did find an interesting website, John Kenneth Muir, and there's some statements from DC Fontana, and she does mention this. We were so rushed doing rewrites, settling in, and trying to figure out who the characters were. After about the 6th episode, which was an act of love.
Did she say that?
She did.
Okay.
After about the 6th episode, we knew where we were going and were ready to run with it. Of course, at that point, we started getting preempted, and the network started doing all those things networks do when they want to get rid of a show. So maybe the writing was already on the wall if they saw this happening. It's hard to say because we really have no sense of how far they were in pre-production and production at the time the episodes were being, passed by or being preempted by NBC. And I do seem to remember that was happening a lot in the springtime. They were getting constantly bumped. So it's hard to say at what point did they get a sense of when did they know. They canceled the program in March of 77.
We don't know how many episodes they had and I don't mean in the can as in filmed, but in other words, you commission a certain number of episodes when you go to series, and before anything ever hits the air, they've got, obviously several of them have to be in production before they hit the air. So you got to figure there's at least a 6-episode lag between it's in the can and it's on the air. So they're working on episode 7 when episode 1 airs, and that's about the point where they probably just say, never mind, don't bother making any more scripts. So I guess that they were working in the dark.
Question: who do you have as having been the writer for this episode?
For this episode, I don't.
Innocent Prey. Because IMDb said it's Robert Hamilton. However, according to JohnKennethMuir.com, it is Nicholas Correa.
Nicholas Correa?
Yeah.
Producer on The Incredible Hulk?
Well, that last name spelled Corea.
Yeah,
written by Nicholas Correa. That's what it says.
Famous guy. I don't know. I didn't look. I figured if I looked, then I would just be upset. It would be, I'd know a name, and I was like, oh, for crying out loud. It's like the time that the guy wrote the episode of the imp that turned out to be the guy that wrote the Immunity Syndrome or Star Trek, one of my favorite episodes. it's like
I thought he wrote Errand of Mercy.
No, I think that's Gene Kuhn.
Maybe.
Or, yeah.
Well, actually, I remember that Errand of Mercy was directed by Herb Solow. And he had a lot to do with Man from Atlantis.
Yeah, Herb Solow was a producer. Yeah, he was a production guy. Big one. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I didn't have the writer's name down. Why embarrass the guy?
Yeah.
Why have I call him out? Nicholas Correa, though. I don't recall ever seeing him as a writing credit.
That's what it says on this website, and that's the first time I've seen it. I'm actually very surprised by it. It comes as I was shocked by it. Now, as for the rest of the story or rest of this website, it's very sketchy. It doesn't go into great detail. It's just a lot of very short quotes. Dorothy Fontana mentioning how much she liked Jared Martin very much and how all the characters had an opportunity to have their story. She even mentions that they had a map of the island, which they called Evoland. It was divided into districts that the characters would journey through before finally getting off the island, so each segment would represent a different culture to encounter, but there was always a definite goal. They were headed in the right direction, and that was always on our mind. I think it was a show with great potential, but we were writing episodes under very high-pressure conditions. We were in just such a rush to get the scripts done. Well, that was pretty obvious.
Well, yeah, most shows are in a hurry to get their scripts, particularly science fiction shows. But it wasn't a good show.
No.
This is the bottom line here is that this show was not a good show. They didn't have a good feeling for what their characters were supposed to be. And notwithstanding, hey, we finally figured out who they are, I see no evidence of that in subsequent scripts after an act of love. And there's no consistency in the story that they're telling with, do we have the crystals? Do we need the writers? Do we... It's a mess. It's just simply a poorly thought out mess. And
one of the problems is that it looks like they were just commissioning episodes left and right from independent writers. And of course, if you're going to get everybody from all over the sun coming in and pitching stories, then every episode's going to completely take a different tone. And that's, I think, one of the things that absolutely killed it. by doing that. As we said in last week, I mean, two of the strongest.
I doubt that writers pitched.
Well, maybe they just bought. They just bought scripts sight unseen.
You know, it's part of the producer's job to go out and try to find writers to write for the show. If it's, you know, if you're in the third year of Friends or the fourth year of Friends, then you've got people who want to be your writer. But if they've never heard of Fantastic Journey and it's just some crazy show that somebody's putting together, they have to go out and solicit people. Now, maybe they solicit them and say, hey, pitch me 3 or 4 ideas. But, you know, it's not like they have a huge wealth of people to pick from. They've got to hit some writers that they think can get the job done or that seem interested in.
Well, if they were really under the gun to get episodes cranked out, I could see them just taking about anything they could possibly get their hands on. So there may be something to what you said. But again, I come back to what I think are 2 of the strongest moments, and that would be Vortex / Atlantium, and then Riddles, and it's because you've got the same writer, or at least in Riddles you have this one writer, and in Vortex and Atlantium she's definitely contributing to that overall storyline, and that's Catherine McAlien Powers. So there you start to get this sense of storytelling continuity, and I'm not talking continuity in terms of detail, but more of a sense of an actual storytelling medium, instead of this stuff that's just like something out of I don't know, it's like out of a grab bag, how everything just keeps changing all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, it's like I never knew what I was going to be watching from one week to the next.
I think that there is also an inherent flaw in the idea. I've read some interviews and whatnot that if you take Star Trek, some of the things that Gene Roddenberry pitched or tried to favor them into going to, that frankly other people on the thing sort of pitched away from. But Gene Roddenberry really liked those parallel Earth stories.
Oh.
And because he could use them as a parable for what's going on in the world. It was much easier to say, look, now we have a planet that's Romans, and now we have one that's the Nazis, and now and although I enjoyed those episodes because I think they're fun and I like parallel Earth stories, it's taking the planet and making it not a planet but a metaphor.
Right.
And I think the more successful episodes are the ones that took the planets and treated them as if they were planets in different cultures, and then still managed to tell us something about our society through what's happening on that planet. But when you get a story like Fantastic Journey, where basically you don't even have to obey the same laws of physics from one
zone to the next,
and those people working on the show have said, you know, we're doing this like Star Trek. You know, they're treating the planet of the week as the bizarre culture of the week, and
each zone of the week was the new Star Trek planet.
But because it's not even just bound up in the same universe, it's just any old thing. I think that probably makes the writing suffer because they probably pitched it that way to the writers.
It's very possible.
You know, hey, you can do whatever you want because it's your own little universe, and they'll just walk on at the end, and they'll be in a different one. So anything goes. If you want to have a carnival that's there for no apparent reason, have at it. That's fine. And, anyway. So, let's see, a couple things. About the series as a whole. I mean, apart from it stunk. I'm not sure whether This Is Worth or Otherworld was worse. I really don't know. They are really kind of down in the pits there. Not last time. Okay, so when we record these, we've got several in the can. So as it happens, like last week, Funhouse was released. And this is the 3rd episode after Funhouse. So as our listener, when we're recording this, you've just heard Funhouse. But by the time you hear this, Doctor Who will probably be over. I don't know.
Most likely.
It could be a long way It could be a long way down the line. And Funhouse. I did a little research, and I could not find where that was shot definitively. But I think it's Pacific Ocean Park, which was an amusement park that existed on the coast, Santa Monica.
Santa Monica.
And closed in, I think, 1967, and was still there for a while before they tore it down, several years. Maybe it was 70-something. I don't remember exactly what it is. But I know, for example, that you can look that place up and see that several shows like Get Smart and The Twilight Zone, and I think there's a Man from U.N.C.L.E. and were shot there. It was a common location when they needed an amusement park. And it looks remarkably like the one I remember from Get Smart. So, but I could not find anything. So I'm going with Pacific Ocean Park, and if anybody knows better, cool. That seems like a good guess for an
Fair
abandoned park. Is this like the Busch Gardens that they used in Beyond the Mountains? Gone now. Long gone, but it was a sort of thing in Los Angeles area where that was shot, and Logan's Run had an episode shot there, and so gone. Just part of the ever-changing landscape of the big LA, which nobody calls it that. But we have had a companion on this journey, Ben and I, a silent companion who has been on the website commenting on absolutely every episode of this show that we've gone on, which just shows a remarkable dedication to a fantastic journey. In fact, an almost masochistic dedication to it.
Yeah, that is because, see, you want to talk about it because you just want to talk about it, which means I have to watch it.
That's right.
I don't have much choice in the matter. However, this listener, he had every opportunity to say,
to escape and run.
No, I will not watch this piece of garbage. I'm gonna pop in the next episode of Deep Space Nine or something like that. I mean, just to get away from this filth.
Anyway, but he had quite a few comments that just tickled my funny bone while we were watching the show. It was making it enjoyable because, like I say, we have this long delay. So we'd record the episode, and then several weeks later, the episode would come out, and then Mr. Iguana is the commenter, and he would make some comment about it, and I would just like, oh, it's like the gift that keeps giving. I get to listen to the podcast again, and then I get to hear somebody else snark on it for a while. And I pulled aside, I hope you don't mind, Mr. Iguana, since it's out in the public forum, I pulled aside some of the comments that he had made, and I just wanted to make a couple of comments about some of the episodes. So we've got something here for almost every episode. So for starters, let's take a look at the first two episodes, Vortex and Atlanteum, and we put on Vortex, and then you'll pardon the beep noise you're about to hear. This is his comment after watching.
To refresh my very dim memories of Fantastic Journey, having not seen it since the 70s, I caught an episode online and wound up hate watching the entire series. I despise myself. I feel unclean. It was just as horrible and disappointing as I remembered. Why did you do this to me?
Now, that's a deep philosophical question. Why do we do this to people? I don't know. This comment actually touches...
Did that actually bother you?
It touches on a fundamental concept of why do we do this? Why do we subject ourselves to these shows? And
because you pick it.
And, well, it's not just that, though. I pick it because I remember these so fondly, although not this one necessarily.
Well,
but
to be honest, so did I.
Fondly as a kid, and then to come back and watch them and have them so brutally crushed.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I remember when you first introduced the idea of us doing the Fantastic Journey, I was very excited about it. Although I did have some trepidation because, as I had expressed in the beginning of this series of reviews that we did, that I had seen an edited version into it, like a 2-hour movie, which was basically just part, the Vortex and Atlanteum. stitched together into a single film on the USA Network. And I remember watching that in the late 1980s and thinking, wow, 10 years have gone by and it does not hold up.
No, it doesn't. So,
and yet I was still very intrigued in seeing the rest of the series again. Yeah. And, kind of along lines with what we just discussed with Innocent Prey, I feel like my innocence has just been crushed as I've been watching this.
It's funny because, all right, a classic show that really, really failed for me, Land of the Lost, which, was missing for a very long time in terms of you couldn't see it. It wasn't in reruns. It wasn't available to purchase or anything like that. And I loved that show. Obviously, it was a kid's show, but I loved that show as a kid. And when we finally got hold of copies, now 10, 15 years ago, but watched through the first season, and I was shocked at how many good science fiction stories were in there, and then most of them were ruined by Holly, who is so annoying as to be unbelievable. It's like, wow, I can't remember her putting my teeth on edge every time she spoke, like she does now. But, kind of a cool with a timey-wimey story stuff. This is kind of neat. And then you get into the second season, and the stories aren't quite as good, and you're still thinking, well, it's all right. It's got they've added some stuff on it, and it's all right. And Holly is still just as incredibly annoying. And then you get into the third season, and it's like written for 2-year-olds. It's like everyone had a lobotomy, and they started working on it's appallingly terrible. And you look at it and you go, oh, see, now I didn't get this when I was however old it is. That in the third, because I liked the third season when I was a kid. It's like, but it's truly written for kids, and apparently there is such a thing. Despite the fact that you're supposed to not write down to kids, they were clearly writing down to kids, and I did not discern that at the time. Fantastic Journey has no excuse. TV shows like Fantastic Journey and Man from Atlantis and Logan's Run and Salvage One, and they have no excuse for being these juvenilely awful. They're written by adults. They're produced by professional television people. What is so hard about not making awful TV that is just stupid?
I don't know.
I wish I had an answer for that.
I don't have an answer for that. I've been doing some reading on Fantastic Journey, and I cannot come up with any reasonable explanation except for what we've already talked about, and that is, we had, or you had shared with me, I guess through reading old Starlog issues, that obviously when Fantastic Journey first started, they had this cast, and then they fired half of them. By either killing them or by sending them home.
Yeah.
And then you have to bring in other people in to kind of supplement that and make this your core cast. Everything that I've read seems to suggest, and of course, remember, this was a mid-season replacement, that this did not have an opportunity to properly develop. And there's no explanation as to why. Did the network have something to do with that? Did they give each episode an increasingly cheaper budget from one week to the next? Were they crunching the amount of time by saying, okay, this episode you've got 2 weeks to hammer it out. Oh, next one you've got 1 week. Next episode you've got 4 days. I don't know what kind of things were going on behind the scenes. All we have to go on are some of the quotes by people that were involved in the show. As I said earlier, Dorothy Fontana said that they were constantly under the gun, and that does not necessarily make for a good environment to crank out a really good story. And Jared Martin even went so far as to say that the show failed by trying to stay on the air, which I think is, if you really think about it, that's that kind of says a lot. That it was a show that should have died a lot sooner. And by trying to stay on, it just got worse and worse with each week. So obviously something was going on behind the scenes that just that created an environment.
It just wasn't a good team.
No, it wasn't. And all they could do was just crank out more garbage and more garbage and more garbage, every once in a while giving us something that wasn't quite as ugly. And in my case, that would have been riddles, which is the highlight of the entire year for me.
Fascinating. I can't think of a highlight for the entire year, but...
Well, not counting Vortex. Vortex is still my favorite.
Bits of Vortex.
Vortex.
Once they got to the pirates, though, I was kind of...
Yeah, then it kind of got lost. But everything leading up to that, I found highly enjoyable. I even liked Atlanteum to a bit. But then it just took a nosedive from then on in and never recovered until we got to Riddles, where it kind of picked up a little bit because, thank God Catherine Powers, she had an idea on trying to create something which I thought sort of harkened back to some of the very earlier scenes we saw in the first episode. So that was the only moments of redemption that I saw.
I don't want to dissuade or to encourage the view one way or the other that this Catherine Powers actually had anything to do with conceptualizing this program.
Oh, I don't know if she did or not. I just know that her name is attached.
Right. Her name's attached to the pilot, but that doesn't mean that, I'm making this up now. That doesn't mean that Dorothy Fontana didn't sit down with, these people and said, this is the idea for the story. I got to commission out the pilot. Here you go, Catherine. Write me a pilot.
Well, it wasn't just her. It was a number of people who wrote that. You've got Merwin Gerard, Michael McCallion, and Catherine Powers. So you had 3 people that were involved in the writing of that episode. Atlanteum was strictly her.
Yeah, and the 3 people could be entirely practical reasons, like one person wrote it, then another person did a rewrite on it, and a third person did another rewrite.
We have no idea.
We have no idea what it was. So, yeah.
Again, and this goes back to, we really don't know what was going on behind the scenes with this show and why it suffered so badly, because... As Dorothy points out, it had the potential, and I think on paper, when you first proposed this idea for a series, it had the potential of being something that could have been really good, but then so did Starlost. When that was first proposed by Harlan, it had a really great idea. It could have been a very fantastic show, but somewhere along the line, other people took over and it just tanked. And I think I'm guessing, but I believe that's what happened here. And in this case, I think it was the network executives that just made the environment so unbearable that it became impossible for them to write a decent, coherent science fiction show.
Could be. It could be. I'm
just guessing.
Yeah.
Because I have no evidence except for just a few little statements that Dorothy has, and that's only her point. That's only her take on that. I'm not hearing anything from the other side, and obviously there was one at the time.
I don't know. I think that the more I learn about network television deals, yes, the network has some say in it, and yes, the network does make alterations to the shows, but it's still largely the output of the production company, the studio that's putting it together. They take notes from the network, and there's some points along the way where, like, they come across this island of this zone where all the people are naked because they have no concept of privacy, and the network is going to be there with the may I remind you of broadcast networks and standards, which says, or our market research says pirates are out, spacemen are in, things like that. So I don't know. I think this steaming turd has to be put in the hands of the people the production company that made this thing.
You make a good point. You make a very good point on that. And like I said, all I've got is Dorothy Fontana's word on that, and I'm not exactly putting a lot of stock into that because there's always 2 sides to every story.
She might not be impartial anyway.
And I think you may have a point there too.
Other episodes, other comments that were interesting. We discussed one of the deeper philosophical, as I mentioned earlier, one of our more deeper philosophical sections was Jonathan Willoway and his desire to take Liana as his bride in beyond the mountains and what that means in the real world as opposed to the sanitized TV world where taking her as a bride just means, oh, you'll be cooking me breakfast kind of thing. There's another piece of it that was a little bit disturbing, and Mr. Iguana pointed it out from talking about 70s.
Yes, there's the whole Liana Willoway sex slave plot, but the episode soon had me wondering which of the androids are the designated sex bots. There's also the problem of Liana having feelings for someone who clearly has the intellectual development of a 7-year-old. Ick.
Ooh,
so
ick.
much ick.
And he's right. He's dead
He makes
right.
a
That
point.
android was totally like a little kid.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's
That's
like, ugh, that's
yeah.
kinda-
There's something very predatory
But
implied
he's pretty. I think that's it. He's pretty. It's almost like Cheryl Ladd's character in this when we just watched. I mean, she's so innocent. How could you know?
Which really does not paint our characters in a very good light,
No,
especially in the case of Liana and Willoway's, and I say with air quotes, son. Mm-hmm. I mean, that does not say that speaks very badly of her. In fact,
He also pointed out that with regards to, remember the robot, the chef, that we made comments, is he's convinced that the back of each android has a big dial that can be set to either insipid, clueless, or camp. And the cook was clearly on camp. I gotta say.
yeah, I think he called it.
An act of love. I totally agree with this first. Go read the comments on our website, fusionpatrol.com, if you want to read all of Mr. Guana's comments, because I think they really are good. But an act of love.
This episode hurt. It hurt to watch. You covered all my main gripes about how terrible this episode is. For 12-year-old me, its saving grace was some suspiciously low camera angles whenever Liana was filmed from behind.
I totally missed that. I'm not going to go back and watch this again to find out.
No, but he makes an interesting point. I mean, I might just kind of like jump around
to see if you can spot
because I could not. I hated that episode when I first watched it. I couldn't bear myself to see it a second time. No way. But that's an interesting observation.
And of course, he is the person who wanted us to watch Funhouse. In fact, looking through the comments, he's been looking forward to us looking through Funhouse on multiple occasions.
What is it about that episode that he was so desperate to have us watch it too?
I spent the first half in head-scratching bewilderment, and from the moment Apollonius reveals his true vision, an open-mouth astonishment. I became lost in space robot intoning "does not compute" over and over again. I have no idea how this ever made it to television.
And I would agree.
It's
it's that bad.
It is that dreadfully bad. And also his assessment of the makeup. If you'll recall, the dog-faced people, the makeup.
Yeah, that was horrible.
The dog people makeup. It's as though the makeup department was on strike and the director's 10-year-old nephew was put on the job. Apollonius' horrific appearance is the central conceit of the episode. Its sub-amateur execution leaves the story a farce. Any gravitas and menace Apollonius possessed vanished in the big reveal.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, if Apollonius were to come around and all of a sudden reveal his face, I mean, I hate to say it, but he'd be something of a laughingstock. I mean, everybody would be pointing their fingers and laughing at him. There's nothing to be scared there. There's nothing menacing about him. It's a joke.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, it's laughable.
But, and maybe this answers the question we asked earlier, he sums this up at the end. And it's like, you know something? This, I think, answers the question. Why we do this.
Funhouse is part of that bonkers pantheon of 1970s sci-fi I contemplate whenever I think there's nothing on TV. Look what I grew up on.
Oh, he's right. But you and I kind of did talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, and I did say that how at the time when this was on, there was no other science fiction that was being produced. And I say science fiction, with my tongue firmly planted in my cheek, but you understand what I mean.
The scare quotes, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I mean, science fiction, fantasy, horror genre kind of thing. This is the only thing we were getting at the time. So, yes, I watched it because it's all I had. So, yeah, I grew up on it, too.
I don't have anything else. I thank you, both Mr. Iguana and other people who have commented on the website. Please, if you're watching these shows and you're enjoying the shows, if you're hating the shows, it doesn't matter. If you're listening, we'd love to hear from you on the website. My email, feedback@fusionpatrol.com. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And then we have another show. We have another show coming up. I don't know what it is yet. I haven't decided.
I'm scared.
Anyhow, listeners, thank you for joining us on this fantastic journey, and we hope you will join us again next time on Fusion Patrol.
Not so cheers.
Fusion Patrol is a Lone Locust production. Like us? Leave us a review on iTunes, or stop by and visit us at our website, fusionpatrol.com. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/fusionpatrol. Our Twitter username is @FusionPatrol, or you can just send us a comment at feedback@FusionPatrol.com. Come check out our new YouTube channel at youtube.com/FusionPatrol. Please, come join the conversation. Our music is Fight the Future by Amber Wolf.